Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be looking at 10 underrated Stephen King short stories, stroke novellas. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, so for this particular video I tried to look at some underrated, maybe stories that are not spoken of as much as they maybe should be, and stories that come from each one of the different short story compilations that he's done. So I tried to include a little bit from everything. Also be aware that this is a top 10. I'm going to be rating it from 10 to 0. 10 to 1. I'm also going to be giving a couple of special mentions as well. And I'm including 2 novellas, although one might not be so much a novella. We're not going to really argue about that too much. And I've included 2 of them right at the end as well. So you can wait and see what I've chosen there. Okay, the first special mention I have spoken about on my channel, and that is the delightful Willa from Just After Sunset. Now, although this is very rarely spoken about, this is actually probably my favorite Stephen King short story out of all of them. And the reason is real simple. It just touches me on a level that is deeply personal. As I said in this other video, like it's about a group of travelers and they're at a train station waiting for the next train so that they can continue on their journey. And this man is desperately searching for his fiancée, whose name is Willa, and decides to go to a nearby town to try and find her. There is a hell of a lot more to this story than meets the eye. It is like a ghost story, a love story, and it touched me on levels. As I say, a very personal story for me about loss. And yeah, I just found it very, very beautiful. And that was Willa from Just After Sunset. Second special mention is they got one hell of a band from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Now, I actually gave a quiz in my last video where I asked where certain musicians could be found in a Stephen King short story, and this is it. Without giving anything away, it's about a husband and wife, and they're bickering, they're not getting on, and they're on a road trip, and they take a wrong turn, and it leads them further and further into trouble, until eventually they come out into this seemingly idyllic town. Everything is just beautiful, but with very strange inhabitants. People of the town don't really want them to leave. I'm not going to say anything more about that story, but it is a hell of a lot of fun. And it's got an ending that I actually found pretty damn disturbing as well, if you really think about it. So that is, they got one hell of a band. Okay, let's get to our list. In 10th position we have Night Shift, and that is the graveyard shift rather from Night Shift. And now there are other stories that are more well known, such as Children of the Corn, perhaps a Boogeyman, but I decided to go with the graveyard shift because it's not spoken of as much. Perhaps it's not, I wouldn't say it's underrated, but it is one of the first short stories that he ever wrote, and I think it is very dark, and it's very bleak, and it's very interesting, where some workers go into, they have to clean out an old mill, they've got a horrible boss, and they go down into the basement, and the further deep down they go, they discover that there's an infestation of rats, but these are not just normal rats, these are giant, oversized rats. And yeah, things get very dark, very grim, and really Stephen King at his most oppressive best. It's very grim and sometimes very gross as well. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and this is an excellent collection. It's not my favorite, surprisingly. It's most people's favorite, but it's still got some very, very good stories in Night Shift. So that is a graveyard shift. Number 9 is Bizarre Bad Dreams, and we got a story called Under the Weather that maybe is not spoken of much at all. I found it very interesting. It's very dark, very bleak. And I like most of his short stories to be very dark and very bleak and very disturbing. And it's about a husband and wife, and he's a salesman, and he's telling a story, and his wife is a little bit under the weather. So yeah, she's got a little bit flu or something, she's not feeling so good. And look, this story a lot of people say is quite predictable. People say that you can see the ending coming a mile away, but I still think it's a good idea just to dive into the insanity of the whole story, of actually what's happening there. And yeah, I found it a really good little short story. Never spoken about, and that is Under the Weather. Next up we get Crouch End from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And now I personally believe, and I think my wife would agree, that this is one of Stephen King's most underrated works ever. It's kind of got a very Lovecraftian feel about it, and it's about this man and wife, and they go to London, and they go in search of a friend in a certain part of London. And this particular part of London is infamous because there have been disappearances there. And there's been talk that that is where it's almost like reality is a little bit thinner there than in other places. And so this goes to very interesting places. Thoroughly enjoyed this. This is not the story that Stephen King normally writes. This is kind of something that's completely different. But it's a fantastic story, and there are some very dark kind of scenes and some stuff that is pretty disturbing when you think about it. Kind of lost and out of sight and not part of this world. I'm not going to say any more to give away spoilers, but yeah, do yourselves a favour, read Crouch End. Okay, in 7th place we have something that is a little bit different. This is not going to necessarily appeal to every one of you, but I found it very sad and very poignant. And that is all that you love will be carried away, from Everything's Eventual. Now this is a story about a travelling salesman during a snowstorm, and he sort of goes into this motel. He gets into this motel, and he's got a very strange hobby. His hobby, or what he does as he travels around from place to place, is he collects graffiti from bathroom walls, and kind of collates it and puts it in his book. And he does this in order to try and push the dark thoughts away of suicide. So it's this sort of thing that he's clinging onto in life. And yeah, this is a very sad, very powerful story. And I know that I've read a lot of reviews that people don't care for it very much. But it's very poignant. It's very distressing. It touched parts in me as well that I found this sense of aching loneliness. It was distressing, and I would recommend it, not for everyone, but give it a go. That is All That You Love Will Be Carried Away. Okay, the 6th story is another one that is often overlooked, but it is definitely one of Stephen King's very dark, very chilling stories. And also kind of has a little bit of a nod towards the Green Mile. And this is called The Bad Little Kid. Bad Little Kid, and it's taken from Bizarre Bad Dreams. And now this is basically a man that is on death row. He's a child murderer, and he's telling his story. He's bearing his heart to his attorney. And he's telling a story of a strange kid that never seems to age, that has basically resulted in the death of everyone that he loves. So apparently he has killed this kid, he's in jail, he's on death row, but it is very creepy. I just remember it is very, very creepy and nasty, and just the way Stephen King describes this particular kid, which is the idea of this kid, is fantastic, so it's well worth a go, and underrated in my opinion. That's Bad Little Kid. Okay, for number 5, I don't really know how to describe the story, except that this might well be the most utterly gross and disgusting and offensive thing that Stephen King has ever written. Not to mean I didn't find it interesting, but if you think that that one story about the man on the island, the doctor on the island in Skeleton Crew, which I'm going to come to later, that's not one of my choices, but if you think that's disgusting, maybe you should try read Dedication in Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Now this is about a nurse, and she's a black nurse, so there's all sorts of people coming and shouting and offensive and racist and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, she's got a best-selling novelist for a son, and she tells a story to a friend of hers, someone, about how that came about. There was this novelist staying in one of the rooms that she cleaned, and then when he left the room she would clean up after him his bodily fluids. Think about just about the sickest thing, yeah, you got it, in order to make sure that her unborn child got the gift of writing from this novelist. I'm not going to go any more into that. It involves some black magic and witchcraft or whatever and other stuff. But yeah, this is possibly the most offensive thing that Stephen King has written. But it is still, I found it interesting. And you shouldn't be turned off just by that. Because it's actually quite a good story. It's quite a well written story. So yeah, that is Dedication from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And it'll give you nightmares. Okay, in fourth position, and I'm not sure if this is underrated necessarily, yet I don't find it spoken of that much, but that is Autopsy, Room 4 in Everything's Eventual. Now this is actually an excellent collection. I didn't realize it until I actually read the whole thing, but there are a lot of real gems in here. But in Autopsy Room 4, a man is bitten by a snake on a golf course. And it's right at the beginning, and he's presumed to be dead. But we know, it's no spoilers, none of these have been spoilers. We know from the beginning he's not dead, he's paralyzed, he can't move anything. So everyone, he's dead. Let's take him to an autopsy, room 4, where we can cut and slice. And unfortunately for this guy, he's completely conscious, but he is trapped. He's trapped in his body. And yeah, it's quite a terrifying concept, and it is actually quite a scary story. But at the same time, there's a lot of black humor and dark humor running through the story. And I have to say to you that the ending is just one of the best endings Stephen King has ever wrote in any story ever. It is just fabulous. So do yourselves a favour, if you haven't read it, that's Autopsy, Room 4. From Everything's Eventual. In third place we come to my final short story, and that is Grandma from Skeleton Crew. Now Skeleton Crew is possibly my favourite collection out of all of them, and it's just got so much absolute incredible stories in here that if I was doing a top 10 I would probably mention The Jaunt, most definitely in my top 3. I would probably mention Survivor Type in my top 3. And there's all sorts of others, The Raft. This is just full of absolute gems. But Grandma isn't spoken enough about, so I just thought I'd talk about Grandma for a bit. And now, yeah, it's about a little boy. His mom's gone to the hospital, I think with his brother, and he's left to look after old Grandma, who is in bed. She's bedridden. The thing is that this little boy is scared of Grandma, and Grandma has some secrets. Grandma, there's more to her than meets the eye. So yeah, this is a wicked little story. Really touches childhood trauma. I think Stephen King wrote that this is something about his own childhood trauma. So yeah, it's an absolutely terrifying little piece, and it goes to very dark places. And I think it's one that should be spoken about a bit more in Skeleton Crew. That is Grandma. Okay, for my number 2 and 1, I'm going to talk about 2 novellas. And perhaps they're not underrated, perhaps they're pretty well known, but I'm going to mention them anyway because they're just so freaking awesome, and they are so freaking dark and terrifying. And if you haven't read them, you need to do yourselves a favour and read them now. And the first one I'm talking about is 1922, and that is taken from Full Dark No Stars. Now this is an absolutely fabulous compilation of novellas. There's 4 novellas in here. I think 3 out of the 4 I really enjoy. But yeah, 1922 just takes a cake. It's about this man, his husband, And he's basically being threatened by his wife, and his wife is not a nice person. She's kind of an alcoholic, and she's a real horrible person. Well, the story is told through his point of view, so obviously we don't get both sides, but yeah, it seems like she's a terrible person, and that he's going to lose his farm, and he's going to lose his land as a result of her conniving that she wants to go to the city, and he doesn't want to go to the city. And so he comes up with a scheme to murder her. And this involves basically telling the young boy as well to get involved, getting him involved, persuading him to get involved in the murder, and also it involves a deep, dark well. So yeah, I'm not going to say anything more about the plot to give anything away, but this is dark, and it is depressing, and it is haunting, and it is really about madness. And at the end, well, actually not just the end, it really involves lots of rats as well. And so yeah, if you want a real trip into darkness, take this whole compilation, but 1922 is an exceptional read. Strongly recommended. Okay, number one position, I want to just talk quickly about the early career of Stephen King. His first published novel was Carrie, and I think that was in 1972. But the first book that he ever wrote, the first story he ever wrote, that only became published much later on, was A Long Walk, under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. But he actually wrote the story when he was at university, when he was studying. And I say, number one is A Long Walk by Richard Bachman, Stephen King. And it's a dystopian horror, and it's about all these boys, 100 boys that enter this absolutely terrifying contest, where they have to walk at 4 kilometers an hour or more, and that's it. And the winner gets anything they want in life for the rest of their lives. So you've got boys between the age of 16, 17, 18, I'm not sure if there's an age limit, but yeah, they march and they march. Now the problem with this is that there can only be one winner. So if you slow down below 4 miles an hour, did I say kilometer earlier? I can't remember. But 4 miles an hour, is it 4 miles? I said yes. You get a warning. You get a warning shot. And if you get 3 warnings, you're out of the game permanently. So basically, as I said already, there can be only one. So yeah, this is a terrifying tale. Really, for someone that wrote it when they were as a student, it's just absolutely brilliant. And it's well worth an effort to try and get a copy of The Long Walk. It's really dark and really bad and really terrifying, and one of his best in my opinion. And I know one of my viewers said that it actually is a novel, that perhaps yes, it is novel length. I didn't include it in my best novels because I considered it a novella. Well, whatever. Whether it's a novel, novella, maybe it's a short novel, let's consider that. But this is just a phenomenal piece of work, written by a young Stephen King with a very, very dark mind. That is The Long Walk. Okay everyone, so that's my list of underappreciated, perhaps less well known Stephen King short stories. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of those, if I've left some stuff out that you would like to recommend. And also just please be aware that this is my opinion. This is all subjective. So if I've included something that you think is rubbish, tell me nicely down below, but just be gentle about it. That's what this thing is all about. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my content. If you have, please be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Take care of yourselves. Keep those pages turning, and cheers.